So pub date got moved back to
Oh,
about,
okay.
I think, 17 days from now. There's issues. Yeah, there's issues printing. It was supposed to come out 2 days ago, but
Well,
yeah, it
well,
got pushed
then
back.
that means we just have it to look forward to. So I mean, that must be quite a journey for you because I know you've worked on other children's books. This is the first one that you're doing just for yourself, right?
Yes, yeah, I've illustrated other authors' books. I've done about seven, and most of
Mm-hmm.
those, I think, if not all, were self-published. So when I was doing my own book, I was like, I think my story is really good. I think the art's really good. I'm gonna try to get an actual publisher,
Oh,
and
that's really
it
exciting. So
happened.
what was that? What made you decide to go that route versus the self-publishing?
Um, it's hard because I see a lot of people doing self-publishing, and unless you're like a marketing
Right.
whiz, you have a large sum of money to print and then distribute your books and all that, it's going to be really hard. And um, I figured, you know what, I really want to go the route of a traditional book, just because I feel like it'll get my book into the retailers, and I felt that this
Mhm.
story needed to be told
Yeah, it is kind of, I mean, there's
and
pros and
read.
cons to both approaches, but definitely going through traditional publisher, you have more access, like you said, to retailers and their marketing and all of that. Well, that's congratulations. That's really exciting. Uh, okay, sounds like we're cutting out a lot.
Thank you.
Hopefully that will work on the connection there. But why don't we jump back a step and first tell us how you got started doing illustration, and then why you decided that this one you were going to also do writing.
Yeah, I've been illustrating since I was about 5. I know that sounds really young. I'm sure a lot of people have kids with crayons, but I was al always making stories and my own little books. And I finally came to the spot in my career where I wanted to make my own story. I didn't want to get paid to do
Right.
other
And
people's stories.
were you always kind of planning, hoping to do that, or was this kind of as you were working on, you said, "Hey, I can do this."
Yeah, I did always plan to make a book. I just didn't have the confidence. And I know a lot of people are scared of failure, scared of rejection. And let me tell you, when I sent my query letter out, I got rejected a lot. I got harsh criticism. I even had people that wanted to change my character to an animal, and instead of a little Mexican boy. So I was like,
Right.
no, this is something about my family, about it's special to myself, and I know there's a lot of kids out there that want to see themselves in the pages. So I said, you know what, I don't care how many
Right.
times I get
Well,
rejected. So it's
that's great that you
mostly
had it because I
confidence.
could see if you were somebody who didn't have a lot of confidence, then you might feel like you needed to change your story in order to get it published. So that's really great that you didn't. But tell us more about the book itself and what the inspiration was behind it.
Yeah, the book it's really a objective view of immigration. I didn't want to point any fingers. I didn't want to blame anyone. I didn't want to make anyone feel bad. I'm just telling a story of a boy who feels like he would have a better life if he came to, the land of opportunity, America. And the
Mm-hmm.
story it really is about my great grandfather. My great grandfather, Jorge, he came here in the early 1900s, um, from Mexico. And I have a lot of family still in Mexico. And you can see how my family that came to America versus the ones that stayed in Mexico, their lives are very different. And that's something that people are dying to do every day, is to come here. And I wanted to use my privilege and my skill set to kind of show my great grandfather's story. And it's millions of people's stories, and just illustrate it in a beautiful way and teach the culture, teach the language.
And why did you make
Yeah.
that decision to just, like you said, I mean, you're not pointing fingers, you're not getting into discussions of the big issues about immigration, but you're really focusing in on one story. And why did you make that decision?
It's, when you bring up immigration, something that's very heavy, you can't overload children.
Mm-hmm.
I taught special ed for 9 years, and
Mm-hmm.
you just can't overload kids. You can't scare them. You have to tell them just
Mm-hmm.
enough so they can make their own decision, so they can understand it. And it's very hard
Right.
to do that with such a big topic. This topic is huge, and I
Right.
thought to myself, how do I not freak kids out about this? How do I? When there's a point
Mm-hmm.
in the middle of the book where he runs out of food, and he has to improvise and make food off the land. And I said,
Right.
well, this is depressing. It's sad. It's scary.
Right.
How do I do this in a cute way, but also
Mm-hmm.
get
That must have been
across
a
the
hard
point that this
balance to
happens?
try and find. Like, you don't want to gloss over it, but at the same time, you don't, like you say, you don't want to freak them out. Was that hard to make those kinds of decisions?
It was very hard. Yes, there's a part where he's leaving Michoacan. He's leaving his hometown, and um, he's looking back at his friends, and he's saying like goodbye, and he doesn't know if he's going to see them again or not. And um, most children have not
Right.
experienced that unless they are immigrants themselves, or they've been in some type of war conflict. They don't know what it's like to say bye to their friends. The most
Right.
we know
Right.
is maybe moving a neighborhood or something, right? So yeah, it was hard to kind of relate and say, all right, how do I illustrate this? It comes down to the illustration and the writing, and I'm glad I got to um,
Mm-hmm.
take the reins on all of that. Although I will say my editor and the other people at the publishing house were like,
Sure.
they had their
Um,
two
and
cents too. So
and one of the things you talked about is how important it is for kids to have empathy with the character, which I think really comes through because you have chosen that story and it's from his point of view. Why is that so important for kids to develop that empathy, especially talking about such a big issue like immigration?
I think the more we know our neighbors and we respect our neighbors and we know that every neighbor has a story, whether they're from Vietnam, they're from Mexico, they're from the UK, they're Australia, whatever, that they all have a story and they're
Mm-hmm.
all deserving of our respect. And so if you ever do meet an immigrant, know that maybe they didn't have to walk across a whole
Mm-hmm.
country, maybe they took a train or something, but they went through a lot, and that
Right. Right.
we
And
should be kind to
like
people.
you said, that you want kids to make up their own minds about immigration. Why was that something you kind of had in the front of your mind that you wanted them to be able to kind of figure out their own views on this?
Wow, that's a good question. That's a good question because I feel like as
Right.
adults we're always telling children what to believe. We're always telling kids what this is why this is happening at the border. I live between Los Angeles and Phoenix, and
Right.
there's you hear crazy stories about the border, whether it's from political ads, political candidates, CNN or
Right.
Fox, or people down the street, or your friends' parents. You're hearing stories, and kids are getting inundated by these stories. And I wanted to make a story where there was none of that. It was simply just telling the story
Right.
of what the majority of
Right.
people go
And what
through,
about for
like my
kids, like
great
you
grandfather.
mentioned earlier that kids should be able to see themselves in this story. What do you hope that kids who have maybe gone through this experience or have seen it with somebody close to them, what do you hope that they get out of the story?
Well, two parts to that question.
Mhm.
First, I want kids that look like me to know that if they did, and whether they're first, second, or third generation, so whether they're first, second, third, fourth, fifth, whatever generation,
Mhm.
they know they can relate to the story. And if the child's an immigrant, then they are empowered by the story. They can show someone, hey, this is something that
Mhm.
I went through, or my mom or dad went through. But also kids that are not even either of those, they can see their friend that's an immigrant and read the
Right.
story and go, wow, I
Right.
understand them
And
a little bit better.
I know you've talked about how you really have a goal of inspiring children of color through your own work, through specifically these books, but I imagine also for them to get to see an author and an illustrator who looks like them. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I grew up
Mm-hmm.
never seeing myself in the pages, whether it was a comic book or a children's book or a movie. Um, if it was, it wasn't the best depicted version of what I would like to see. Ideally, so I really wanted kids to see me, um, see someone that looked like them doing this. And I just want to make sure that with this book and other books I do that I'm currently working on, kids can look and say, "Hey, that's someone that I can relate to," because I feel like I guess I'm creating stories that I
Was
wish
there an
existed when
aha
I was a
moment for
kid.
you when you realized like, hey, how come nobody in the books looks like me? Or was there someone who inspired you when you were a kid?
That's a really good question. I was too young to have like an aha moment. I think what it is was you kind of put yourself lower than other people. Because I always saw Caucasian characters, and my favorite books are Caucasian characters. So I put Caucasian people above myself because I never saw myself doing anything cool. I was never going to space. I was never doing anything, right? I was just like, there's those people, and then there's us. And as I got older, I said, well, that's wrong. I'm not blaming anyone, but in
Right.
2022, we're still at 6% of uh, Latin books are out
Right.
there. So I'm
And
like,
what kind
wow,
of
we need to
reactions have you
change that.
gotten from kids? I don't know if you've had a chance, especially, with the pandemic, to do a lot of school visits or anything like that. What kind of reactions do you get from kids when they see you?
Yeah, so I read it to a couple hundred kids in Texas virtually. That was my biggest one yet, and I think the most common thread I got was my
Mm,
father or my grandfather is an immigrant, or I did that. I had to come here and do
mm,
that. This is a school in South Texas and the Austin area, and I also heard things like the art's beautiful, or my grandma makes food
mm-hmm.
like that because there's a lot of food in the book. And another kid said that he looked like the character. So I I'm happy to hear those things because I tell you what, I'm in my 30s, my early 30s, and I wish that I was that young and I
Right. And
saw
then
someone
just
come to my
imagine it's
school and read to
so
me.
great to imagine the impact that's having on those kids, like you said, to see you and the work that you're doing, and then to read the book and see someone who looks like them, the culture that's like their families. That's really amazing. Do you already have plans? I know this one is just coming out, but do you have plans for other books or what you're working on now?
Y- Yes, so I just finished the second book. Um, I don't know exactly what's
Is it
happening
a
with that with
sequel
my
or
publisher.
is it a
And I
sequel?
started, what's that?
Okay.
Yes, it's a sequel.
Oh, nice.
It's my character when he's older, so I won't give anything away, just because I'm very
Nice.
secretive about that stuff. But it's a sequel, and then the third one's about his granddaughter. Um, so it's kind of dealing with an immigration,
Mm-hmm.
and then what happens when they get here,
Right.
and then their children and how they're being raised. So there's three parts to it. It's like a trilogy, and right now I'm
Cool.
actually working on a coloring book. So I believe next summer the book will re-release in
Mm-hmm.
Spanish, fully in Spanish, because right now it's bilingual. And when it re-releases, I think
And
the
I can't
coloring book
remember,
will
did
be
you
released
do the
with it.
translation or did you work? How was that working? Like, did you translator or?
Um, so
Okay.
my editor is bilingual, so she translated the Spanish version and the bilingual version I did because I can
Right.
speak Spanish at about a
That must have
fourth
been
grade
pretty neat
level.
to be able to work on that. I mean, because for so many kids, they grow up, speaking two languages or Spanglish, and then that must be nice to have that represented in the book.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, I was fluent in Spanish up until about third grade when I moved, and when I was making the book, I was like, I definitely want the book to be bilingual, just
Mm-hmm.
because I think it's
Well,
just
thank you
more
for joining
powerful.
us. This is so great to get to talk with you and hear about it. And so we'll look. So you said in about 17 days, more days.
Yes, 17 days or 18 days, I think. Yeah, I got pushed back to the end of this month, and I have my Barnes and
Okay.
Noble launches. Those are still happening. Because
Mm-hmm.
I do have a few copies of the book for myself. And then if parents are watching this, you can go to my website, and I have about 15
And there's
free
also,
coloring
you have a
pages they
trailer.
can
I
look
mean,
on.
and just if you just go to the website, I mean, just the art on the website is so cool. So anybody, if you haven't checked it out, you really need to go look at the website and then get the book when it comes out.